There's so much need in America's public education system. But I probably should warn you that investing in education is an incredibly risky endeavor. But that's only because there are so many smart and well-intentioned people that are investing in all the wrong things, and they don't even know it. But they probably shouldn't feel too bad. This isn't the first time or the first industry where folks were investing in the wrong things and had no clue. Let's look at the energy industry. Hundreds of millions of dollars were invested in the solar panel company Solyndra, only to see that company go bankrupt and have to lay off over 1,000 employees. Now, who would have thought that an innovative solar panel company like Solyndra would be such a colossal failure, and a blanket with sleeves called the Snuggie would be a multi-million-dollar success? I know some of you guys ordered the Snuggie. And we can look at Major League Baseball for other instructive examples about investing in the wrong things. And some of those examples are really well depicted in the movie Moneyball. And since that's one of my favorite movies, and I imagine some of you guys have not seen that movie, I'm going to take some liberties here and reenact a really important scene from that movie for you guys. And so in this scene, Billy Beane, who's the general manager of the Oakland A's, he's talking to his team of, and is played by Brad Pitt, he's talking to his team of scouts about how they're going to replace some key players. Okay, so bear with my acting skills here for a second. Guys, you're just talking. La, 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 la. Like this is business as usual. It's not. We're trying to solve the problem here, Billy. Not like this, you're not. You're not even looking at the problem. We're very well aware of the problem. I mean, okay, good. What's the problem? Look, Billy, we understand what the problem is. We have to. Okay, good. What's the problem? The problem is we need to replace these players with what we have. Billy says, the problem is there are rich teams and there are poor teams. And then there's 50 feet of crap. And then there's us. Baseball is an unfair game. And now we've been gutted. We're like organ donors for the rich. Boston has taken our kidneys. The Yankees have taken our heart. And you guys are just sitting around here talking that same old good body nonsense like we're selling jeans. Like we're looking for Fabio. We've got to think differently. You see, I've been working in education for over a decade. As the founder of a college prep organization, I later worked in education policy, and now I'm leading an education advocacy organization. And there is no doubt in my mind that education is also an unfair game and deeply inequitable. And if we're ever going to help kids win, we also have to think differently about our approach and our investments. About a year before I was born, a famous report was released, and it was called A Nation at Risk. And it sounded the alarm about the declining quality of America's public education system. And it talked about the impact that that would have on this country's prospects and future. And now, more than 30 years has passed, and America is still struggling to provide excellent learning opportunities for all of its kids. Let's just look at some of the data. We can start at the earliest ages, in preschool. Black preschool students are 4 times more likely than white preschool students to be suspended. Suspended. Let's think about that. We're talking about Elmo loving, Dora the Explorer watching, swiper no swiping 3- and 4-year-olds getting suspended. We have an inequitable system. Let's go to 4th grade. On a national assessment of reading, only 21% of low-income students were able to achieve proficiency, compared to 52% of their non-low-income counterparts. It's a deeply inequitable system. But this isn't just a problem for low-income students or for students of color. Nationally, families are spending $1.5 billion annually for their kids in college to take remedial courses. And this is not just for lack of effort. There are a number of really smart people that are working every day to try to make this education system better. And a ton of money is spent trying to educate kids in America. Nationally, we spend about $600 billion annually of public money on pre-K through secondary education. And another $54 billion of private philanthropy is invested annually in education. I mean, that's more than the GDPs of some countries: Poland, Sweden, Saudi Arabia. But our education system is not just inequitable because certain students are not getting the quality of education they deserve. Our system is also inequitable because the folks who are most impacted by public education, or the primary customers of public education, are the ones who are the least likely to have an influence on the decisions that ultimately affect them. Let me put that into context. And I got to take you guys back a little bit. When I was a teen, I worked for the movie theater, and I worked in the concession stand. And they would encourage us and incentivize us to sell combos to customers. And just in case there are any doubts about my credibility and why I'm on this stage, I was an award-winning combo seller at the movie theater. Seriously, I had to let you guys know. And when we were pushing these combos to customers, in any given week, if our box of Bunch of Crunch was not selling well with the large popcorn and the 2 medium drinks that you could get, they would replace it with something like Raisinets or Twizzlers. And if a given movie was not doing well in the box office with customers, it would not be in the theater for too long. So let's contrast that with education. There are schools, there are classrooms, and there are policies that have not been working well for students and their families for decades. And nothing changes. Nothing. So I contend that if we're ever going to see lasting and meaningful change in public education, we have to fundamentally disrupt this inequitable system. Now, I'm not going to stand here like I'm the smartest guy in the room here. I also got this very wrong before, too. See, I used to work for the Department of Education in Delaware for 4 years, and I led research work and policy efforts. And I got to see the good, the bad, and the ugly of the education policy process. And for those of you who might not know that much about Delaware, it's a small state, less than 1 million people, somewhere in the midpoint between Washington, D.C. and New York City. And I came to the state at a really great time in 2012. The state had just received $120 million of federal funds to implement a whole slew of education reforms that would change the quality that Delaware's 130,000 public school students would receive. And it was like an education reform buffet. You had increased academic standards here, you had more professional development for teachers here, you had coaches for principals here, we had stronger accountability here, and we had more data, better data, research. We had it all, and we did a lot. And there were some great successes. But far too often, great ideas and great initiatives would succumb to the stubborn inertia of adult-centered politics. Now, I could be here for a long time telling you about the types of stories that depict the type of inertia and adult-centered politics that I'm referring to. I mean, you wouldn't believe the amount of energy that it takes sometimes to do certain small things. I mean, there was one year when we worked for months and negotiated for months to pass a regulation that said a school principal could go and observe and evaluate a teacher unannounced. That's it. That was the win that year. No warning, unannounced observation. But I think no story really captures what I think is wrong with the system more than the time that I broke the unspoken rule of education insiders. So let me tell you a little bit about that. As I worked at the department, I sat in countless meetings where we were making important decisions that would affect all of Delaware's public school students. And I was the only person of color in the room. And this is an education system in Delaware where a little over half of Delaware public school students are students of color. And I would sit in these meetings, and I would see the voice of parents, the voice of students, the voice of communities was never represented at the table. It was just the usual suspects. You'd see interest groups representing superintendents, school principals, teachers, higher education, always also in the room as well, different times. So we saw all these folks at the table, but one can only tolerate and stomach this unfortunate reality for so long. So at some point, I decided to mix things up a little bit, as is custom for me. So as one important meeting was coming up, where the state was going to be deciding and discussing how it would assess and evaluate teacher quality, I decided to do something different. I invited dozens of parents to a public meeting. The team I was working on had garnered a list of parents as they engaged in what's called, in the bureaucracy, stakeholder engagement at some point. So I took this list and I just blasted the meeting invitation to the entire list. It was about 50 people. And then something really interesting happened. A few days later, after I sent out my invite, the Secretary of Education received a call from the state's teachers union. And they interrogated him, like, what is your team doing inviting all these parents to a policy meeting? So the Secretary of Education met with my manager, and the Secretary expressed his concern with my rogue parent outreach. But the so-called damage was already done, the invite was out, and so we waited. So on the day of the meeting, we all convened, and 4 parents showed up. Only 4 out of the 50 or so that I invited. So I guess my experiment failed. Well, not so fast. With only 4 parents in the room, the decision makers at the table could not proceed with business as usual, where they breezed through the agenda and rubber stamped things. They actually had to explain their policy positions. They had to answer common sense questions. They had to receive pressure and pushback from the folks who were going to be most impacted by the decisions that they were making. And that's when it became abundantly clear to me. What if we empowered parents, students, and communities to participate in the education policy process and push for policies that are truly student-centered? What if education was a true partnership with those who know the policy and the parents and the communities that know their needs intimately? Research would tell us that this works, but it's also just common sense. And if this is the type of system that we like to see, there are some clear things that we can do. For starters, we can show up. We can find out when that next school board meeting is taking place, or that state board meeting is taking place, or whatever the venue where important policy decisions are being made. We can show up. And not just show up alone, invite someone, or maybe invite 50 people like I did, and pressure the system. And it doesn't matter if you're a parent of students in public schools or not. It doesn't even matter if you are a parent. We need our country, our communities, our corporations to understand that we are all paying the price right now for an education system that systematically underprepares so many students for their potential. The second thing we could do is change how we approach philanthropy in education. And I'm talking about our individual philanthropy, but also the philanthropy coming out of our corporations and our foundations. We need to invest in efforts to disrupt the stubborn inertia that I referred to. And this means we don't always focus on organizations, but we need to focus on organizing as well so our underrepresented communities can harness their voice to push the system to a place of excellence. We need to move our investments beyond expenses on pricey consultants and elaborate plans to expenses on public pressure, to push past the politics that have advantaged adults for so long and disadvantaged so many students. You see, I have to close with another quote from Moneyball, because it's my favorite movie, where Billy Bean, or Brad Pitt, said, "If we play like the Yankees in here, we are going to lose to the Yankees out there." You see, simply put, we cannot continue to approach an inequitable system as if it's business as usual and expect to see any success. But I know that we can create a winning system, a winning education system for all kids, when we think and invest differently. Thank you.